Hey everybody, Mr. Hughes down here in Hughes Studios once again to bring you a new tutorial, and this time I'm going to be talking about the Liquify tool. Now, we know in bitmap images that each image is made up of little dots, or in this case little squares, pixels that are colored by numbers. We've talked about that before. What we're going to do with this tool is we're going to actually tell the program, I want you to treat these all like they're jelly. So right now it'll be a solid chunk of jello, if you will, and then we want to be able to just smear them or spread them out. And this is where the kind of the magic of these programs really work. So in this situation, I'm going to pick on Tom Cruise just because I feel like it. And I'm going to ask you to go ahead again, grab a photo from your camera roll, grab one from the internet. It really doesn't matter. And open it up in Photopea. So pause the video if you need to, and then continue on. It's very simple to do. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this layer. So you can do that by simply right-clicking on it, choosing Duplicate Layer. You could also just drag it down here to the New Layer button. Both will work fine. And you can see here it gave it the name Background Copy. And I'm just going to change it to Liquify. And now that's been called Liquify, and you'll see why I did that here in a second. Up here in the Filter menu, there's an option here for Liquify. Now, I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm going to let you go ahead and try them. But you can see here, okay, you have a couple different options. Now, again, I'm going to get you to play around with this, but this is going to kind of work like a paintbrush, the same thing. So you have a density or a rate, so like how strong it is, the opacity. So do you want it to be, take full effect, or do you want it to be kind of see-through in the size of it? I'll let you play around with those ones. But the three that I'm going to focus on, just to give you an idea of how the Liquify tool works, and then you can go ahead and play with the rest of them to see exactly what's going to happen, is the first one I'm going to play with is the smudge tool. Now the smudge tool, imagine that you've got these pixels, so you've got a plate of these little pieces of jello that make up this image, and I'm going to take my finger and I'm actually just going to smear them. And that's what's going to happen here. So this works really well for things like that you want to elongate. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to elongate his earlobes a little bit. I'm going to take his nose and elongate that a little bit. And then I'm going to take his teeth and kind of make them a little bit more pointy to give it more of a vampire effect. So to do that, I'm going to find a brush size that's roughly the size of his nose, and watch what's going to happen as I click and drag. I'm just going to take those pixels and I'm going to smear them down. Now you want to be careful. This is where people do really ridiculous things, because they'll do like bodybuilding pictures and they try to make themselves look big and they smudge their biceps, but then they smudge the background as well, and it looks really cheesy. You can tell it's fake. So for instance, if I took this picture of him and I did that to it, well, now you're smearing the lips and everything. It doesn't look real at all. So you got to be really careful when you use tools like this. So I find maybe even going a little bit smaller and just kind of working, clicking, dragging, and letting go. And I'm just going to elongate that nose a little bit, right? I'll come over here to his earlobes and maybe stretch those out just a little bit as well. Again, being really careful about things like the background. So we're kind of giving him sort of, trying to make him look a little bit more elfish. This is the side where I really have to be careful because of his hair. And if you start, now hair is kind of chaotic. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. But as you stretch it out, right, you got to be really careful that it doesn't look too ridiculous. So I'm not going to go too much here, just a little bit. Okay, just to elongate a little bit. I talked about his teeth as well, so let's make this a little bit smaller, and maybe what I'll do is kind of pull that tooth down just a little bit, maybe make it a little bit tighter. Okay, you get the idea. I don't want to go too much on the teeth here. We'll get going on the next one that I wanted to show. The next two that I really like are these two right here. So you've got shrink and you've got blow. These are going to either, think of it like taking a vacuum and sucking it in, and all the pixels are going to get sucked into the vacuum cleaner, or you're going to stick like a leaf blower into it and make it pop out. So if I take the shrink option, so let's take his eye over here, and I'm just going to click, and now this time I don't have to click and drag. As I click and hold, you're turning on the vacuum and sucking the pixels in. So be really careful with this one, because you can see here, right, it just constantly kind of sucks it in and sucks it in and sucks it in. So again, while these are fun and have some fun with it, you want to go for realism, because if it doesn't look real, people don't buy it, you don't have a successful project. So I kind of go along and pull it in a little bit. And the blow one will do the exact opposite. It's going to make that huge. So again, if I just went in the middle and did that and went a little wider, it may not look as realistic because you want a little bit more on the edges. That's actually not too bad in that situation. I'm kind of happy with that. So the pupil's kind of huge here. So now when I click OK, you can see that I've liquefied this. I kind of probably could have done a little bit better on this eye right here and made it a little bit less. But let's take a look at the difference. If I turn off the liquify layer, I should say, there's the original image. So you'll notice what happens here, and I did a terrible job on this ear right here. You'll notice what happens is it changes the original pixels forever. Be really careful. And that's why I duplicated the layer, because I want to make sure that I do not destroy the original pixels. If I wanted to go back to the original, like, oh wow, this is really bad, or perhaps even I did a really good job except for that ear, well then I can take the ear from the layer below and kind of bring it up to fix it, or I can just delete this and start all over again. So really important, duplicate your layer, grab the Liquify tool, and play around with it and see what you can get done.